Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and with the support of Omnovos, Canada's digital customer engagement company. Omnovos makes personalization easy by helping you engage the right customer with the right content at the right time. Find out how you can get started quickly and affordably so you can focus on doing what matters most, driving revenue and margin growth at realcustomerengagement.com. This episode is also supported by Rewe. Real-time, interactive, worldwide intelligence. Visit riwi.com to learn more. In this episode, I welcome Samir Kulkarni, CEO of Showcase, home of Canada's hottest trends. Samir shares his innovative approach to staying ahead of the top retail product trends with social media listening and agile supply chain management, merchandising that also made them an important destination for PPE in the early days of the COVID-19 crisis. Next, I catch up with Gary Davenport, CIO, mentor, and board advisor. We talk about the early days of working together and launching Hudson's Bay's groundbreaking e-commerce, plus his wise advice to modern retail technology leaders. But first, let's hear from Samir from Showcase. Samir, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining me. I've known of you and Showcase. We met, when did we meet last year at a Retail Council of Canada event? I think the first time we met was it was a brick and mortar event or the flyer event, I think. And I'm akin, so to speak, because of my years at the shopping channel was very much akin to the format. So I've always loved the format and the execution. So I was really interested, and I'm really thrilled you could join me on the podcast. Why don't we jump right in and tell me and tell my listeners a bit about your personal and professional journey and your role at Showcase.
That's great, Michael. Thanks again. So I'm the CEO of Showcase. I am born and raised near Toronto and actually lived all over the world in Asia, Europe, and the U.S. over the years, mostly for school. And have been raised in a family business. So really business is in my blood. And when I was finishing grad school at Yale in 1999, the Showcase opportunity actually came up. And Showcase was founded by Amin Jivraj, a brilliant entrepreneur in Edmonton a few years prior. And so Amin and I became partners, and we started with about 12 stores in 99. And we and our team have built the business up together to 117 stores now over the last 20 years.
And so date that for me. So when was the original, like the origin of Showcase brand, and then when did you join? Like how long has the brand been around since the 12 stores to the impressive number you have now?
So it's been 25 years. So Amin opened the first store in 94, and then I got involved in 99. The majority of our growth has come in the last 10 years, where we've essentially tripled in size from about 40 to about 120 stores now.
Wow. And I don't talk to a lot of people who are growing like that. So I'm really, again, so thrilled you're able to join me, because I want to dive into all that and what makes you successful. And I think do you operate just in Canada, or do you operate outside Canada, that kind of stuff?
So we have 107 stores across Canada from coast to coast, everywhere except for Quebec. And then we have a newly formed division in the U.S., which now has 10 stores. And our hope is to grow that, proportionate to the population. So there's a big runway there that we're hoping for in the States as well.
Now, let's talk about your U.S. stores for a bit. It is typically the case that it is a tough market to get into. There's been lots of firms who've tried and not been as successful. It's a bit of a crowded market. What opportunity did you see? Is there not a retailer quite like you? Why do you find that the U.S. market so compelling?
For the longest time, we were focused on growing in Canada because there were malls left that we weren't in, and we kept growing. I think at one store a month for 10 years. Eventually, ran out of runway in Canada as we maxed out around the 100 mark. And that's when we started looking to the States. And in the old days, we used to look up to Brookstone and Sharper Image. Those small format, gadget retailers in the mall. We actually tried to acquire Brookstone, and we were outbid. And Brookstone eventually actually closed their mall business. And so we decided that we might as well open organically. And so we started with 10 stores in the Northeast, for example, King of Prussia and Philadelphia. And we're working very closely with landlords to expand that, because if you just look at the population story there, with 10 times the population, gosh, 100 store chain in Canada could be 1,000 in the U.S. And what's exciting for us is that there is no direct competition, and it's a crowded market, but our model is very unique. So we feel there's some white space there for it.
Well, that's interesting because those are the two brands I was thinking of in the back of my mind, right? The Brookstone and Sharper Image. Because Sharper Image was such a thing 15 years ago, but somehow both of those concepts, they just faded. I don't want to say faded away, but somehow they lost the script, right? I mean, it does leave a gap. I guess that gap is filled notionally online with the QVCs of the world. I guess is the closest proximity, not that they have physical presence, right? Would you say they would be competing for the same customer? Like, give us a sense of who you would be, competing with, or the type of customer that you would be looking at.
Sure. Yes. Brookstone and Sharper Image really did lose their way. They had unique products, but I think they lost the control over the trends per se. They were slow to react to changing tastes. Also, Brookstone and Sharper Image are very focused on the executive male traveler, right. the gadgets in the airports. QVC is probably more our customer in the sense that it's more moms with kids, it's more home items, it's softer goods. And so I guess QVC, HSN in the US would be closer counterparts, but still we feel we've got a little bit of a unique model that sets us apart.
Well, let's talk about the product assortment and what is in the store. So I have some familiarity with it, and not just because I've been to the store, but also just the channel itself, having spent time at like a QVC equivalent, the shopping channel, or as it's now known, Today's Shopping Choice. So that solution-oriented novel item mixed with a base. So tell me about, first of all, as you think about your merchandising strategy, tell me how you go to market and what do you look for in your assortment, and how do you manage the blend between, fast movers, hot items, popular items, and just everyday items? So tell me a bit about that.
So Showcase is the home of the hottest trends. And so our focus is on those trends at the leading edge, the bleeding edge of a product's life cycle. And they are about to break into the mainstream. So these are not just novelties or curiosities. These are actually products that have usually quantitative evidence that they are rising dramatically in demand. And the reason I say that is that we are a data company at heart. We have developed proprietary trend technology to track 6 million words on any given day to see which item is more popular than it was yesterday and by how much. And so really we have a 3-part business model. The first is identify the trend. And that is a very data-driven model. There's always going to be human judgment involved, but having data behind us is really what sets us apart from more of the gut feel buying or instinctive buying that happens sometimes in other types of new product formats. So really, step one of the model is bring the trends into focus, so we know what we're going after. The second step of the model is bring them to market as quickly as possible. So within days or weeks, we are able to commercialize products through a network of factories in Asia primarily, or they may be domestic branded products. But we have the nimblest supply chain in retail, really inspired by fast fashion, by H&M, by Zara, and what they've done on a global scale. We've done that in a smaller way. And so we can bring that product to the shelf in days or weeks. The third part of the business model is to bring it to life in store. And that is the demonstrations, the fun and interactive store environment. It's the events that we do. It's the education, the after-sale service. That 3-part model of bringing the trends into focus, bringing them to market, and then bringing them to life with speed and with scale is really what is different about us. I
guess over the course of both our careers, we've seen changes in the market. Let's call it the direct response market. Because when I started my career, there was this predictable pattern. In other words, items would debut on direct response television, short form, long form, whatever. And that would create the data. In other words, it was a bit of a portfolio strategy, right? 10 items would come up, but there'd be a fast mover, like a ShamWow, for example. Like it'd be one of 10 things, and for whatever reason, it is successful. And that would then find its way into the online shopping channels, and then that would find its way into retail. But that seems all collapsed now. That what you're describing is something different than what happened 20 years ago. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, you are an expert in direct response, Michael. You're taking me down memory lane with ShamWow and Tybo and all of those products from the past. So we did start in that category, and I'd say we're the world's largest retailer of purely infomercial, direct response driven products. But to your point, that model has changed because there are not as many people watching television. So today, that category is actually a small part of our business. So I would say that we are more of an as seen on social media company today than ever before. And so Facebook probably is the largest direct response advertising engine. And we are actually one of Facebook's largest advertisers in Canada. So we are creating demand for our products with a very direct response, ROI-driven model. And so we will spend $1 on Facebook today, and we expect to see $2.50 in revenue on our website that same day, and another $2.50 in store the next day. And so it is very much a direct response model, just modernized for the digital age, and with the targeting capabilities and the micromanagement that is possible with digital that was not as easy with television.
Well, that's so interesting, because I remember in the transition between the two, what you're describing and kind of the traditional way of going to market, that there was a time when direct response companies were flooding the market with afterbuy in excess of what made economic sense, because what they wound up doing is driving sales in the store. So it's basically the precursor to the sophistication that you've just described. With so many items, do you have in the assortment everyday standards, and do you lay into the assortment everyday buys, or would you say the majority of the assortment is characterized by the most exciting product characteristics? Like, do you have a blend on your shelves, or is it an 80-20? Exciting items and items you need every day while you're here. How do you think of that?
Right. So you have some products which are usually the new shiny objects, the very exciting, fast ramping trends that maybe 3 months or 6 months from now won't have the same shine on them. And so that is a big part of the business, because it is also a traffic driver. That's what brings people in and makes the headlines. We also have the perennial products. Taking a branded product like Proactive, which has been a top 10 item for us for 20 years in a row. So you have some of those perennial items that you just know will continue. But I would say that the pace of innovation has increased for sure, especially with social media. New and novel ideas come to market more quickly these days. And so we have really ramped up our speed of iteration. And we have a lot more new products coming in every day, every week. That also adds to variety and adds to traffic driving, because people want to see what's new.
Yeah, it's exciting, right? It's exciting, right? Always something new. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that one difference with us is that the customer really has given us permission to surprise them. They're not expecting a specific product category. They're not scratching their heads when they see something strange in our store. They actually expect it. And so that gives us the permission to try new things, new product categories, and really be flexible and open.
Well, you talked about having a nimble supply chain. Let's explore what and how you responded to the COVID crisis early on, and did you make any changes to your assortment, and how did your supply chain flex, given the uncertainty and the disruptions that were happening? Like, talk about, again, did you change your assortment at all, and what have been the impacts on your supply chain?
Yes, we could probably write a book about COVID, and this year, like I think many retailers can. It was definitely a unique year, and we pivoted dramatically. So for us, this really started in January, where we started to see supply chain challenges in China because of the coronavirus taking off there. And then the Chinese New Year, which usually is a 1 month hiatus, became a 2 and 3 month hiatus because of travel restrictions and so on. And so we already had a heads up in January and February of where things were going.
So you had early indications that there was going to be, like, at what point did you start to say, this is a challenge to the supply chain versus this could be a big challenge at retail? Like, where was that point for you?
Yeah, so February was the turning point for us when it became not only a supply chain challenge but a public health crisis. And by March, it was full on for us, because we have locations only in malls, and so we can see what other retailers are doing just by looking out the door. And retailer after retailer was closing and going dark even prior to the provincial mandates. And so in late February and early March, we had to sit down as a team and really decide what we were going to do. And Amin and I have family in healthcare. And, my cousin is an OBGYN in a COVID-only hospital, so delivering babies for pregnant COVID-positive women. And she herself was 4 months pregnant at the time. And so we were hearing these heartbreaking stories about the lack of PPE. It was really, you just wouldn't believe that this would be happening in this day and age and in this part of the world. And and so we really put our minds together to say, look, if we can help, if we have the supply chain know-how, if we have the network of suppliers and factories, can we do our part to make sure Canada gets its fair share of PPE? So by mid to late March, we had converted the stores entirely to become the home of PPE in Canada. So we had 150 SKUs in days and weeks, everything from NIOSH certified N95 masks to hand sanitizer to face shields and everything in between. And we were chartering flights from China so that we could make sure we served first responders. And so that actually deemed us as an essential service virtually across Canada. And we obtained COVID-19 site licenses and medical device licenses from Health Canada to enable all of this. And this was entirely new to us. We had never sold a bottle of hand sanitizer before. And so we learned quickly and we were able to pivot. And so we actually were able to keep almost 100 stores open, uninterrupted through the pandemic, and preserve employment for about 500 people. Now, it was a very strange time, mind you, because the mall was otherwise closed. And I think if you knew the secret entrance to get into the mall and could get past the security guard, you'd go down this dark hallway and you were either going to Shoppers Drug Mart or to Showcase. And it was a very surreal time. And I can't be prouder of our team for having been right on the front lines of that and in very, very difficult circumstances.
Well, as you said, you're primarily mall-based. So let's talk about what you did and how have you managed your relationships with those landlords. I guess it's also any tips for retailers listening. But how did you get through it? Because, as you said, it was a difficult time and it was not business as usual. But did you do anything to manage the relationships through those through all those shopping malls from coast to coast?
Absolutely. We had very detailed dialogues and collaboration with landlords across Canada. And for the most part, they were spectacular partners, very understanding, very accommodating. Being in malls, we're obviously at the mercy of the landlords and how they provide access to the malls and what hours they allow and so on. And so for the most part, they were very, very supportive. Obviously, all of our walk-by and impulse business went away because you were not allowed to walk into the mall unless you were buying something specific. And so that's where our email marketing came in. So we have amassed a list of 2 million insiders into our loyalty club over the years. And so we were sending out 10 million emails a week to our customers to tell them that we were open, and that we had special hours for first responders, for healthcare workers, and so that's how we were able to get the word out. And so you would routinely see lineups going out of our door simply because the email had gone out for that day, and due to social distancing protocols and so on, there were lineups forming outside. And so landlords were very, very supportive throughout all of that, and we couldn't have done it without them.
Yeah, I'm from Ottawa, and I know you're in, I think, Carlingwood and Bayshore, right? When I looked up your stores, which are, you're in a class of malls. Do you have any concern about those malls now and moving into the future? I mean, a lot of those malls are apparel based, a lot of apparel retailers. What are you thinking of the future of those shopping malls are?
Yes. We're in a few malls in Ottawa. We're in Saint Laurent as well. And I think when we look at the B and C malls, those obviously are the ones that we're going to be more concerned about because they may not have the top brand names or
the tenant mix or whatever.
The tenant mix or the draw. But I think we're certainly big believers in bricks and mortar. I don't believe malls are going away at all. I think, even today, despite everything, and although e-commerce has grown dramatically for us, our in-store sales are still 70% of our business. But what we're seeing is a change in the type of traffic and in the psychographic, the psychographic intent of the customer walking in. So we find that there's a lot less walk by and impulse traffic than ever. And obviously that's in part due to COVID, but also because I think the psyche of the customer is that they don't have time. There's too many things to do in the day. They want to get in, get out. They're not necessarily, wanting to spend the whole day. And so we found that there's a shift to ad-driven traffic, and that's why we advertise so heavily in social media to really drive the footsteps so that people are coming in for something specific. So I think in that way, the burden of traffic is really shifting to the tenant. It used to be that you're relying on the landlord, the caliber of the property, the neighbors to get. Are
you seeing that reflected in? You described some great discussions. Are you seeing that reflected in discussions about rents? That you're taking on a burden that used to be really the responsibility of the landlord?
We're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel on that one. Certainly, landlords also have bills to pay, and wants to see their revenue go down, and that goes for landlords as well. But yes, we are seeing movement on rents on renewals, and we're basically making the case, I think successfully, that we need to drive advertising. Advertising isn't free. And that money has to come from somewhere. And so the rent really has to right size to accommodate that.
Right.
I also think that malls will continue to be very important for, unconventional delivery, curbside, instant delivery services. So having that local presence is still critical. And I think no matter what happens, well, maybe I'll knock on wood, no matter what happens this Christmas, I think the malls will still be busy and busier than they were the rest of this year. So I think malls still serve a critical role as a hub in the community. And we're still a big believer in malls as long as the rent can accommodate the changing realities.
You mentioned e-commerce. Let's talk about that for a bit. So, it's been what's been called the great acceleration. I imagine a fair bit of your business was done. I think you said 70% was in store. So if my math works, 30% was done online. Talk about what you've seen in your online business in the COVID era.
Yeah, so certainly when the malls closed in mid-March through June, the majority of our business shifted to online, just out of necessity and convenience for people who couldn't access the malls. But even then, it continues to be strong. So yes, today it's around 30%. It definitely has accelerated things. Anyone who was on the fence about online is probably not on the fence anymore.
You got knocked off that fence, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think for our type of product, which is non-commodity and is unique product that customers may want to know more about, and may want to discover in store, and it's not necessarily something on their shopping list, at the moment, but they're curious and they want to know more. I think bricks and mortar has a critical role to play. I think the example we use is that you've got pizza delivery, and then you've got restaurants, and so if you know what you want to order and you just want it to arrive soon, and you don't need the experience and you don't need the socialization and you don't want to hear the specials, you just want to order it and you want it to be efficient and cheap, then pizza delivery is for you, and that's what online is all about. But if you want the experience, if you're going out with your friends and family and you want to hear what the specials are and you want the ambiance and you want to learn more and you want it to be an experience, then that's where the store is going to come in, and that's the role that we try to play.
Well, it's that bifurcation, right, between experience and between experience and efficiency, right? So, yes. As you said, online is brutally efficient, but it leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the overall experience, particularly if you're, it's terrible for upsell and cross-sell and impulse. It just doesn't work so well. Listen, I can't have you on the other end of the mic without tapping into some of your wisdom about the hot items. I got to do some shopping here. So, I'm looking, of course, I'm a big Mandalorian fan. It was released today. So the Baby Yoda probably is going to be in my background. Any idea I saw there's a couple of versions on your site I'm going to get, actually. But any idea what in your mind and your merchant's mind is going to be a couple of the hot items for the season?
Absolutely. We did a big Baby Yoda sale in preparation for season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Excellent.
But yes, we have lots of great items in store. We have a 90-page gift guide actually on our website, shop@showcase.com. And a couple I would just point out, some of my favorites. So on the health side, everyone's focused on at-home fitness now and staying active during the quarantine sedentary lifestyle that we all have. So the big item in that category is QB, which is a under the desk elliptical.
I just got my mother one, actually.
There you go. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's a huge hit. On the home side, we have the Cozy Cuddler, which is the softest, most comfy blanket hoodie. So you really can cuddle up during the cold winter months. And then I guess finally on the toy side, we've got the Happy Nappers, which is it's an unassuming plush pillow animal that actually opens up into a cute sleeping bag. So it's again great for the kids, great for the fun times. And I'll give you one bonus one, which is the viral TikTok sensation that started, according to our trend data, just 10 days ago. And we will be the first retailer in Canada with stock coast to coast, and that is Cocoa Bombs. Have you ever heard of this, Michael?
No, and I'm on TikTok. Maybe the algorithm's sending me different stuff around dogs and DIY. Tell me, what is it? What is it?
You will know about it soon enough. But if you heard it here first, here it is. So imagine a round chocolate bomb that inside is full of mini marshmallows and cocoa. And so you drop this chocolate bomb into a cup, pour hot milk over it, and the mini marshmallows explode out of the bomb, and you have hot cocoa whenever you want it. And so this is going absolutely nuts. We've already started pre-selling this product after the data told us this was big, and we've got chocolate factories around the world working on the project. So it's really that's really going to be the surprise hit of the season, I think.
That's awesome. Well, it's great to hear. Listen, congratulations on your success, and I wish you well and continued success and expansion in the U.S. and continue to find those fun, great items and a good holiday season. Thanks for coming on to the Voice of Retail podcast and sharing your story and your insights and a great discussion about the future of malls. So, Samir, thanks again for being my guest on the Voice of Retail podcast.
I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you so much. Be safe. Be well.
Gary, welcome to the Voice of Retail, my friend. It's been a long time. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Michael. It's a pleasure to be on the Voice of Retail with you.
Well, it's great to hear your voice, if not see you in person, which would be better, but there it is. You and I worked together in the late 90s and early 2000s at Hudson's Bay Company. So we go back quite a while. I've been a fan of yours for many, many years. But let's start at the beginning. So for those who may know you less, why don't you tell us about yourself and your personal and professional journey and your experiences in retail and all that great stuff?
Okay, thanks, Michael. So my life story, in a nutshell, is I worked
in a small school in rural.
Yeah. Any event, I worked in retail at the Hudson's Bay Company for 30 years. I started as a trainee systems analyst right out of university and eventually worked my way up to be VP and CIO. I had a wonderful career there and worked with some really great retail executives, including you. From an IT perspective, I worked with virtually every functional area of the business and every acquisition in the growth years. There was no shortage of challenges or stress. I was never, ever bored. I was also quite active in the industry representing HBC, including at various CIO councils in Canada, the US, Europe, and I was also on the board of VIX. And finally, I attended NRF in New York every year as one of the ways to keep connected to what was happening in the industry. After leaving HBC, I decided to try something new, so worked in Canadian telecom for Allstream. I learned a lot there and was able to bring my experience from the retail industry to the party, which was a real plus. I enjoyed my time there as well. More recently, I've been closely associated with the CIO Association of Canada, including being the national president for 5 years. I'm still very active on the board of directors. And for those who do not know, CIO Can represents over 400 CIOs and CISOs right across Canada in all manners of industry and organizations, including retailers. And we come together to network, share best practices, lessons learned, promote executive development, and be the voice for Canadian CIOs in Canada. I've also served on the board of directors for the Information Communication and Technology Council out of Ottawa and as a board advisor for the Canadian Channel Chiefs Council. In addition, I'm a chair of the Program Advisory Council for the Information Technology Management Program at the Ted Rogers School of Business of Ryerson University. And finally, I still do some management consulting, and currently I'm in the middle of an assignment to assess the digital transformation plans of a prominent organization on behalf of the board of directors. And when that's not keeping me busy on the personal side, I was born and raised in Toronto, where I still live with my lovely wife, Linda. I have 2 grown sons with wonderful daughter-in-laws and 4 energetic and fun grandchildren. I enjoy playing golf, but I've never figured out how to do it very well.
Well, it's such a rich background. And I was going to ask you, actually, because I didn't know this, so many people who came to work at Hudson's Bay in my time there came from the Zellers organization that was moved to Lawrence Street. It was the big location on Lawrence Street. Did you always start in Toronto, or had you moved around?
No,
did you start with the Zellers?
No, I started with the Bay, but ended up being a large part of the Zellers migration to Toronto. So I spent a lot of time in Montreal. Also spent a lot of time in Winnipeg when HBC owned wholesale and northern stores, and did stints there as well as with ShopRite. So some real names from the past in different retail formats. I was going to say,
next thing you're going to bring up is Towers.
Yeah, I
integration.
did that one too.
So that retail history. And then you and I worked on, it's funny, 20 plus years later, you're talking about digital transformation, because you and I worked on the launch of HBC.com, which was really the first big e-com initiative. Now, there had been ones before, to give credit where credit's due. The Club Z online tool, gift registry was already up and going, and that platform, I think they just took that one down and replaced it like last week practically. It was such a solid platform. So you've got such experience, and right from the .com boom days when it was go till I'm glad to hear, in other words, that you're still hands-on. But you bring this great history of both operational perspective around a major multinational retail banner. You talked about how you've kind of merged different businesses as they bought them, and then you still got that, or also bring that 10,000 foot level as the CIO of CIOs, so to speak, and all those things. I wanted to talk about then what you saw as kind of big technology and vendor relationship trends in, first of all, the before time, in other words, pre-COVID, and then talk about what you've observed over the past 8 months and how retailers should be thinking about their technology strategies now. I mean, for some, it's just a mad race to build up capacity, but really from a strategic perspective, how should we all be thinking about technology at the strategic level in the midst of kind of getting ready for a busy holiday, but really, has it changed in your minds? And if so, how?
Great question, Michael. It really is a challenging time to be a CIO, especially in retail. So retailers and other organizations have struggled for many years on how best to move ahead with large and complex technology initiatives. The promise of new technology generating new revenue or dramatically improving productivity has been compelling, but very difficult to achieve with the inherent limitations of people, process, and technology. Very many real-life stories of technology initiatives not quite going the way as planned, or projects failing to deliver the planned benefits. Now, with the pervasiveness and ease of use of the newer digital technologies, it's possible to fundamentally change the customer experience and create new profitable business models. Concepts that you and I were actively involved in promoting 20 years ago, as you mentioned, for e-commerce or omni-channel retailing, for example, are realities today and chasing the face of retail. Customer experience is the number one priority, and the bar is constantly being raised. At the same time, undoubtedly, our world now has changed forever in response to COVID-19, and it's not totally clear yet as to what normal operations will be like when the quarantines and related restrictions are finally lifted at some future point. In addition, traditional business revenues have been severely impacted for many organizations. So one of the questions for CIOs at this time is, what are you doing in response to this crisis, and how do you use it as an opportunity to further your strategic agenda and objectives? In my view, CIOs should not waste this opportunity presented with the crisis. So here's my answer. In the hierarchy of needs, I believe CIO needs to do some basic things first. First, ensure the protection and safety of their team and all the related stakeholders that they serve as the first priority. Next, you got to update your business continuity and DR plans so they remain current and relevant from an enterprise risk management perspective for this crisis and the ones still to come that we don't know about yet.
It's funny. It's funny you bring that one up, particularly because I remember a call that I had with retailers in February, and we were just starting to get a sense from retailers of the COVID impact. And at that point, it was mostly concerned about supply chain and maybe some tourists, right? We're talking like early February. But I remember I was on the webinar and I said, if you can hear the sound of my voice, get your business continuity plans out. But, I remember being on a business continuity planning thing, and it was all about, if an airplane hits the building kind of thing. In
That's
other
right.
words, if all the, if all the servers are wiped out, it was never conceived that suddenly everybody in a week would be home.
That's right.
talk about, and great big retailers, all retailers of all sizes have business continuity, and there's a fire, there's a natural disaster, but nothing of this scale and scope, right? This sudden movement and the demands that it puts on the IT infrastructure. Suddenly everybody's either working at home or they're Zooming.
Exactly.
Or they're...
So that's what the IT teams were really busy doing at the start of the COVID crisis. Fully supporting remote working with the appropriate management processes and tools, and also ensuring that the underlying infrastructure were robust enough to cope with the new demands. I was going to say, then you got to add to that cybersecurity practices and oversight.
It's exactly what I was going to ask you. I mean, I've heard that the threats have gone up now, not down. I mean, intuitively more bad guys are home like everybody else, I guess.
Yeah.
And then now you've got all these executives working from their home offices, which is, it just opens up more, I guess we could say in the parlance, more nodes for people to hack around with, right?
Absolutely. You're right. And there's just more opportunity for the bad characters to create more problems for the rest of us. So it's quite challenging. And so in the midst of all of that, these CIOs also have projects in progress. And so they've got to make a fundamental decision. Do I keep those going, or has the business changed so much that I need now to take a step back and change those plans? And then last, of course, you want to leverage the newer digital technologies at the same time to assess emerging opportunities and proactively adjust the business model to the new operating realities that are now in front of you, which could be to dramatically cut costs or to find new sources of revenue. And it's really this last point on the digital piece that really excites CIOs, because they want to lead their organizations out of the current crisis and lead it to the longer term renewal of the overall organization. And so my message is this. There's a crisis with us, but it's a huge opportunity to take a step back, reset the agenda, and leverage the newer technologies that are now available to generate new models and new revenues.
I always find it a funny phrase, particularly now, don't waste a good crisis. Nothing good about this crisis. It's a crisis and it's terrible. But as you say, the worst thing you can do is just not move. In other words, you just not react. And I was talking down the podcast to the chief digital officer from Staples, Simon Rodriguez, and he grew up in our era to some degree where you had, I remember you and I paying big companies a lot of money just to be able to take a credit card online and integrate it into a system where now this cloud-based services. And I think that cloud-based ID and e-commerce is, I guess, more well known, but it permeates now. I mean, and there's lots of reasons not to do it, I guess, in organizations. And this, what you're describing, there's lots of reasons not to do it, or to study it longer, or to make the big move. But now is the time to make bold but yet thoughtful decisions, I guess, if I kind of summarize what you've just been saying. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Michael. Exactly. The work that I do as a consultant, I get a chance to see a lot of smaller, mid-sized organizations. And the sad fact is they haven't covered the basics. And so when a crisis like this hits, they're really in a scramble. Whereas if you've done some prep and you've got things relatively in place, you can react. That's also my message, is take a step back and make sure you're doing the basics, and don't be afraid to take the bold moves, be it a move to a cloud or blockchain or AI or whatever it is.
Never too late. And it's not too late to start, by the other sounds of it. I remember walking into one of my clients who's a small or a mid-sized organization in the midst of this back in late February. And I said, you should send everybody home tomorrow and find out what happens. And what do you mean? I said, well, I guarantee you some percentage of the people you think can connect won't be able to. You better find that out now than later. And I think that's what you're describing, right? Is that kind of be prepared, but do the basics first, and it's never too late to start the basics, right?
That's right. Right on. You got it.
Yeah. One of my mind, in my mind, as I think about you and working with you, one of the defining characteristics, in addition to kind of this in-depth experience, was the ability and the way that you manage technology relationships and partnerships. I mean, these are big organizations that retailers in Canada will deal with anywhere in the world. They're often bigger, way bigger than they are. In fact, as big as retailers can be, even at multinational level. Some of these are big, sophisticated players. What I remember, you put together, you and Dave Poirier at the time, I believe, this kind of group of, sometimes they'd compete with each other and look at each other not so great, but you managed to get them all in a room working on a cohesive strategy to help your business. So tell us about that kind of, in other words, what's your advice to working with vendors to make sure that it's 1 + 1 = 3, and you're not always chasing them as we always say we're looking for partners, not mercenaries, but it's a harder thing when you got 3 or 4 of them that won't even talk to each other, and you've got to, manage to pull all that together.
So you're right. While I was at HBC, we did institute a very innovative and highly publicized strategic technology alliance at the time. And it served us well for the period of significant technology investments. And this brought together 5 leading large-scale technology suppliers who we got to work together to create. The intent was to create a retail showcase and store of the future for the benefit of all parties.
Right.
The alliance eventually ran out of steam and ended up after about 5 years. But it served us well in the midst of that major investment and transformation process. And as I step back to answer your question, anyone who has ever been a CIO will tell you that a significant amount of time is spent on managing relationships with suppliers. These can be good or not good times. But the question really is how best to maximize the value for the benefit of all concerned. So for me, the first thing is to realize that not all supplier relationships are created equal, as suppliers come in all shapes and sizes. Many of these relationships will be purely transactional in nature, which is fine, as long as that is a common understanding between the two parties. And these transactional relationships will be driven mainly by cost and service level objectives, with the commercial terms usually managed through sourcing or procurement functions of the company. On the opposite end of the spectrum are strategic supplier relationships. And by definition, these will be the most important and impactful to the agenda of the CIO and will require personal attention of the CIO. In addition, many suppliers will position their product or service as deserving the designation of strategic, but the reality is that it should only be reserved for a select few. So based on my past experience, in direct answer to your question, the 2 starts that I would recommend would be 1, carefully review your existing and planned expenditures, and then your strategic priorities to determine which suppliers should be potentially considered as strategic. And based on that work, number 2, for those suppliers that are worthy of consideration, develop a roadmap with each of them based on the characteristics of, and these are the 5 that I learned about: transparency, clarity, accountability, viability, and longevity. And once that is placed, the stop that I would recommend is to limit the amount of time and money that you're wasting with the transactional only suppliers and seek to consolidate those expenditures if possible.
So it's really, you look at your base of vendors, and that could be in the hundreds for some businesses, right? I mean, from, as you say, and really like your top 3, your top 5, and really put down on a piece of paper who's strategic and who's tactical. And then the tactical is basically an SOW driven kind of relationship, right? That solves a problem. And sometimes people, I'm sure, could graduate from one to the other over the fullness of time, but you're less, I guess, if I think about your 5 criteria, you're less worried about their viability, so to speak, than you are, I'm making a giant investment and we're going to be partners for years. Because there's a sunset on every deal, potentially.
That's right.
but it's really kind of trying to decide who fits in which, and then 80-20, I guess, is your time. What you're talking about is allocating your time 80-20, right?
Yeah, and a simple way to do that, Michael, that I found is I do a quadrant, and one part of the quadrant is strategic versus non-strategic in terms of how do they support your goals of where you want to take your business. And on the other part of the quadrant is high spend or low spend. And you're looking for those in the upper right quadrant that are high spend and strategic. And those are the ones you're going to spend your time with. That's
a great illustration. I was just kind of drawing it out on a piece of paper. I love those quadrants because it reminds me of our days together. So you're going to spend a lot of money with them. You're going to spend a lot of money with them. Whatever they provide you is really important. And then other things, everyone is important, but not everybody's kind of equal. Well, listen, it's been such a pleasure catching up with you because I think it's for our listeners and the folks in the retail industry, just that kind of, as I said, both operational, hands-on, done it, plus that 10,000 foot level, as I said, and advice and managing relationships in a very complex environment that's fast moving. I mean, it's not that retail wasn't fast moving to begin with. We didn't enter this in a tranquil period of stability exactly, but you've been through it all. So Gary, listen, thanks so much for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast and sharing a bit of your wisdom. How can people get a hold of you if they want to learn more, perhaps find out more, or even engage or talk about engaging your services or get some of your advice?
My LinkedIn account or my email is garydavenport@rogers.com.
All right, very good. I'll put that in the show notes. So Gary, thanks again for joining me. Again, great to hear your voice, and I wish you all the best and a great weekend ahead.
Thanks, Michael. My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks to Samir and Gary for being my guests, plus Omnovos and Riri for their support of this episode. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Please rate, review, and be sure and recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of LeBlanc Company Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.